Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. We're going to get started here. So today we're going to be giving a presentation called A Deep Dive into the Triad, Nexus, Pig Butchering, and Money Laundering Network. And this is basically a threat emanating from China, a very complex threat, which is both corporate threat with also some unknown threat actors that are on this network. And it's quite complicated how they're getting their infrastructure. So we're going to explain exactly what they're doing, how they're keeping this infrastructure online, and I'll give you a little teaser. They're basically stealing Amazon accounts and other sort of cloud hosting accounts, and some of the ramifications from this type of infrastructure being online available 24/7.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kasey Best. I'm Director of Threat Intelligence here at Silent Push. As you can see from the wonderful bullet points that we're going to skip past because we don't have enough time, I've been in cybersecurity for a hot minute, and Zach is one of the many phenomenal analysts on my team.
Cheers. And I'm Zach Edwards. I'm a senior threat analyst. I have a lot of experience in online ad systems and various financially motivated threat actors. So we're going to jump in real quick. We have a lot to cover. I'm going to go over what infrastructure laundering is, some details about the polyfill.io supply chain attack some folks may be familiar with, a little bit about the corporate entity that owns some of this called ACB Group, some details about the pig butchering websites that they've been running, and details on the CNAME chains, some infrastructure details, and then a whole bunch about money laundering. And then we're going to end with some details about retail phishing scam and some other sort of summary details. So briefly, what is infrastructure laundering? And this is an important concept. So when we talk about infrastructure laundering, everyone here is probably familiar with bulletproof hosts. So the concept of going to a host that doesn't respond to abuse complaints and just let you keep hosting that infrastructure. Infrastructure laundering is a little different. So these threat actors are basically using a specific Chinese hosting company, and for whatever reason, this Chinese hosting company is having other criminals spin up illicit accounts on services like Amazon. And the time between when they illicitly get that account and when Amazon takes it down, they're mapping those IP addresses into their infrastructure. So they basically have a rapid effort to illicitly acquire cloud hosting accounts. And then they also acquire cloud hosting accounts through low quality Asian IP services. And so this is sort of a new form of obfuscation where the rapid acquisition of cloud accounts mapping into this creates some really interesting opportunities to hide their infrastructure and keep it online and fast for Western audiences. So we're going to get into a bunch of details about that here, more technical stuff. And what is Funnel CDN and Triad Nexus? So Funnel is basically a content delivery network, like many other content delivery networks, but this is a content delivery network that's getting online with these illicit accounts and basically stolen cloud accounts mapped into their infrastructure. And so we've dubbed this network Triad Nexus, because it is deeply connected to Chinese criminal schemes. And what we're basically talking about today is really the tip of the iceberg. We are going to continue this research, have some more details coming out later this year. This is the new way that a lot of Chinese criminal organizations are getting their infrastructure online. And the CNAME chain shenanigans that we're going to talk about is getting worse and worse and more complicated. So we're basically going to give you a primer on what's happening, but what we explain here is scaling up very fast. And we've been tracking this for over 2.5 years. So we have a lot of details at Silent Push about this. But the whole investigation, this whole effort wouldn't have happened without other external researchers putting out information about the polyfill.io supply chain attack. Just briefly what that is, basically a service, polyfill.io, was providing a developer service that was integrated into thousands of major websites, from NASA to the Hulu homepage to everywhere in between. Lots of people integrated this domain and this JavaScript snippet, and then all of a sudden a Chinese company bought this domain, and everyone was sort of wondering what was going to happen. And the person that had originally created a service started warning people in February of 2024 saying, hey, this is bad. I don't own this anymore. A Chinese company has bought this and I have no clue what's going to happen. Fast forward a few months and Sansec and Google basically said, wow, there's a supply chain attack going on. This service is now redirecting some mobile users to low quality casino websites. And so a lot of security researchers said, low quality casino websites, that's garbage. That's not a problem. That's not a threat. So some folks just ignored this. This same organization also ended up registering quite a few other domains and were doing similar mobile redirections. Fortunately, this polyfill attack was ended. Namecheap basically took over the domain and made it so that nothing could resolve when it was connecting to it. Briefly, the ACB group, and we have a little typo there in the header, but ACB group is essentially a Chinese consortium that runs online gambling websites and also happens to have this content delivery network amongst the portfolio. It's a very interesting organization. We're not going to get into all the details, but we are talking about the money laundering that they support and the criminal schemes that they're hosting. So you could maybe imagine that some of these gambling networks, there are many other opportunities for research here, and I will leave that for everyone else to get into. But as we got into the ACB group and some of the entities, specifically Funnel CDN, we did appreciate that they were marketing this, basically bragging about their infrastructure within China. So we pretty quickly realized there were some things to look in here.
So back in 2022, our team initially had looked at a large cluster of fake trading apps, and we'd gone in, developed out the network, saw they were impersonating the ASX, Coinbase, a bunch of different sites in order to continue their fraud. And this actually led us to different types of networks, but we didn't have the full picture of exactly what we were looking at until later on. At the peak of the infrastructure up here, you can see that they had thousands of active domains, and while in 2024, 2025, it's a little bit more modest, they're still spinning this stuff up actively. We actually checked this morning. There's still active infrastructure hosted on Amazon. It's been up for a while. And this sort of highlights the problem with infrastructure laundering when threat actors are using these techniques. If you are still going by old ways of detection, if you're still in that old previous mindset where you block domain or you block IP after it's been weaponized, it's not helping you get ahead of the threat, and it's not actually doing anything to mitigate the threat actor. So you can see this page here. This one actually went down just after we posted a public blog on it, but it was live for almost 2 years. And this one helped us map the different CNAME record changes across the CDN. So I won't bore you too much with too much of the technical details. We've highlighted in orange the pieces there for you to follow. So the CNAME record starts there at the .vip. And then in February to March, it changed over to the funnel01.vip. And then again, it swaps over to the wildcard fn03.vip. And again, this is the, go ahead.
And briefly, we are actually seeing changes here as well. So one of the more interesting things is this is evolving from these three to now many, many other CNAMEs that the network is abusing.
Yeah, so the network just sort of keeps getting complex as time goes on. But what the snapshot here shows you is that the client domains were all mapped to a specific CNAME record, like the FN03 right there. Then from there, they would hop over to FNVIP100.com, and then they would sort of follow that entire chain until it redirects finally to the IP address point of presence, which is the physical location of the server. So whoever's visiting the site has the fastest response time, so that your victims are getting the best service possible. Now, this fun diagram was a lot of fun to put together. There's a lot of work in here. There's over 200,000 different unique host names that we had identified at the time being processed through this network. More than 95% of those host names are being generated via DGA. That's domain generation algorithm. So if it looks like somebody just rolled their hand over face over a keyboard, that's what we're talking about. But you can see the pattern here, and I don't want to point because I'm definitely not that tall, but you see on the left side, somebody starts over there, they get mapped to one of those different CNAMEs, and then from that CNAME, they get mapped down even further until they finally get to the point of presence IP address down there at the end. And one thing I want to highlight here again is that when you're trying to track a threat actor, it's important to know how they manage their infrastructure, because if you know how they manage their infrastructure, you can track it all. And that's what we've done here at Funnel. So this was a snapshot from their pricing page. We thought this was interesting. We always like to include this on our slide. It shows that they only appeal to very specific types of organizations, because you can see down there at the bottom, they have an 80% discounted rate for clients with 50 domains or more. And that's a very specific type of customer, especially if you're trying to, as a threat actor, you're trying to spin up a whole bunch of domains. You want to make sure law enforcement isn't stopping you. You've got, however many people you're impersonating or however many brands you're impersonating. You want to make sure that 2, 3, 4, 5 takedowns a day are bothering you. They're providing the prices right. This fun piece as well, when we were investigating Funnel, this shows their error page that they use for the CN. So if it's misconfigured, this is the unique error page, and I emphasize and foot stomp unique because you can use that for threat detection. And you can actually use that for a lot of different threats. If they have their unique error page that they've set up, something custom for them, you can search through that, obviously with our tool, but just keep that in mind whenever you're doing your hunts. Anything unique that the threat actor is doing is something that you can use to follow them back to the rest of their infrastructure. And here we had identified again, this is a snapshot in time, but there's over 500 funnel IPs that have been active in that week. And while you notice that a decent amount of those are on the different agent ASNs, about 40% of them at the time were actually hosted on Microsoft and Amazon. So that's that infrastructure laundering piece that we're talking about. They're not just hosting on Chinese ASNs where in the West we might say, all right, well, that's probably suspicious. I'm not going to go there. They're popping out of Microsoft and Amazon so they can hide within Amazon's traffic, so that they can hide within that detection and obfuscate what they're actually doing and make it a lot harder for us on the threat hunting side, on the blue side, to protect our customers and enterprises. So wow, you can actually see really well. I love this screen. This just shows that Funnel had been renting Microsoft's IP space here. You can see through our PADNS data, and this goes back, I believe, to 2021. Mm-hmm. So you can see the length of time this infrastructure is staying up. And I will give Microsoft credit. They've been doing a really great job of trying to knock this infrastructure down and take it down as fast as it comes up. But again, that's that, punching after they're already standing up. If there's 16 guys in the room, you're punching one at a time. It doesn't really work. And here you can see a nice little world map of where the IPs had been hosted. So 20 in the US at the time, some in Hong Kong, some in Japan, some in Singapore. And the thought there, as we were looking at this network, is they're hosting in areas that if law enforcement wanted to work together, they don't traditionally work together too well. Or if they do, right, there's a little bit of a time zone difference. So it makes everything more difficult.
Now, we're going to be stepping into the money laundering side of this infrastructure. And so as we were looking through what was actually hosted on Funnel, we started to appreciate there were tens of thousands of online gambling websites. And this is exactly the type of website that they were redirecting people to via that polyfill supply chain attack. And I'm sure a lot of folks here have stumbled across one of these low-quality gambling websites, and you've just said, online gambling website, I don't have any interest in this. But really, we want to remind people you should be pausing on this because these are oftentimes used for money laundering. And if you dig into just a little beyond the initial page, you can find something wild. And so our team found tens of thousands of gambling websites with dozens of unique brands. And as we started looking, they had a lot of commonalities. You can see here in the bottom left, this tether lottery that they were doing. And so across this network, we started to see, well, they're different brands, slightly different looking sites, but for some reason, they all have very common offers on them. And so our team basically created a query to track just these casino websites. And we realized that they were basically segmenting this by favicons or by brands. So if you figured out one brand's favicon, you could just search for just that favicon as a filter and then get the thousands of websites where they were impersonating that casino brand. And we basically had strong suspicions that it was fake. And then in our process, working with Wired, or with TechCrunch rather, on the publication of this research, they were able to reach out to all the online gambling brands. And one of the major ones said, this is fake, this is not us. And it further confirmed that this network was basically creating an illicit money laundering network, abusing other people's brands to get over the finish line. And as we started to realize that all of these gambling websites were created by central actors likely tied to Funnel or the clients, we started to look at the code of all these gambling websites, and we found that there was a GitHub link basically embedded in some of the code. And that GitHub link led us to a profile that basically had every template that was used on Funnel. And so we immediately said, wow, okay, we found a developer that for some reason they are making the templates that we're finding for the money laundering, the pig butchering schemes, various investment stuff, just like all of us here. So we looked into what they basically had in this GitHub repository, and we did find that they had basic pages in there about money moving, and various Telegram accounts. And we were able to find that exact template, or very close to it, actually live on the internet with their updated Telegram channels. And so we started to communicate with the Telegram channels, and we started to get a whole bunch more details about what they were offering, what these websites were actually doing. And it's basically a process where you deposit money at one end of this casino, you lose the money, and then you can actually take the money back out in a different location. So it's classic money moving. And these people basically, if their bank called and said, wow, you just lost $10,000 on this website, are you aware of it? Say, yeah, I was playing blackjack online, whoopsie daisy. And the bank says, okay, no good for you. And maybe you lost 10,000, the bank thinks, but you cashed out 9,500 in cash somewhere else. And so these networks basically are deposit your credit card or whatever that initial bank deposit is, and then there's schemes to get that money out in the back end. They have many different ways to do that. And we just want to know that on these Telegram channels, they also bragged about the different casino brands, so you could pick the casino brand that you wanted to launder your money through, which is a really creative service. And this is briefly what that process looks like of moving money. It's quite complicated, but this is really common in China. And so if you're doing research into Chinese threat actors, you absolutely need to appreciate this type of infrastructure, because we're seeing more and more and more. All of the various crimes, the crypto crimes that are going on, a lot of these folks are trying to launder money. And with all this mission Triad groups, they're trying to launder the money. And so really you have to be aware of how these systems work, so when you see a website that's promising various features, you recognize it.
And just again, to harp on that, it's that, yes, it might be a low quality or trash website. Yes, it's probably not going to be used by somebody to lose a couple dollars, but it's part of their network. It's part of how they're running the entirety of their scheme. And without that extra window, you only ever have one side. So that's just something we want to encourage when you're doing your threat hunts, is make sure you know the full picture. And speaking of knowing the full picture, so one of the things that we did or found during our research is that there was this huge retail phishing scam. And one of the ways that Triad Nexus is mapping their infrastructure is they actually tie different types of scams or different criminal clients or different types of fraud to specific CNAME records. And so what we found on this one is that all of these different retail phishing scams were actually tied back to a single CNAME record. So again, that talks about that piece I said earlier, where if you know how they're managing their infrastructure, now you can go track the rest of their infrastructure, and now you can characterize it and help protect your clients. So again, the 650 domains on just that one CNAME record, right? This one was a ton of butchering and investment phishing login pages. You can see some previously live examples right there. But again, just to foot stomp that's an entire CNAME record just dedicated to criminal phishing, dedicated to pig butchering, and that's how they were managing their infrastructure. So when you break that down a little bit further, we're going to get a little bit more technical. Please stay with us. Don't eyes glaze over too hard. I promise we're still interesting. You can see the different ASNs that they have from highest to lowest density. You can see Microsoft, Amazon, and Cloudflare right there in the middle.
And briefly, as we're looking at this slide, so there have been changes here. As we had mentioned, basically, Microsoft has been cleaning this up in real time. Cloudflare and Akamai was also targeted at one point. And so if you've been targeted by this threat group, you have to come up with real-time defenses, or they will double down, triple down on the abuse. And Amazon, as we mentioned, we keep on telling Amazon, you're screwing up. What are you doing? We've written public blog posts. We've spoken with them. And even today, Amazon IPs are still mapped in this infrastructure. And it's bananas. And another brief note, the CTG server. If you're a threat analyst, look into CTG server. That's as close to a bulletproof host as you're going to find. And there's a lot of very interesting Chinese scams out at ASN.
Yeah. And then again, just as you're going through, if you see suspicious TLDs, top level domains, keep an eye out for it. Here, a lot of the retail phishing scams are on .com, but again, they vary as well. If you see .xyz, it's probably not good. Another piece of infrastructure, or another infrastructure detail that is worth noting here, is that 100% of the ones in this retail phishing network all had name servers that were associated with this specific registrar. This one is the gname pte.ltd. This one's out of Singapore. So they'll either be on the A share DNS or the B share DNS right there. And then if we go to the next slide, again, that's because they're all registered out of, again, that same registrar. So you can use those infrastructure details, the name servers that they're using, the registrars that are using, the ASNs that they're using, how they move across, what their CNAME records are, how they manage all of that, to get into the mindset of the threat actor and sit from their side to track everything that they're doing.
So what we've basically covered today is just the tip of the iceberg for what's going on. So we've explained part of this funnel, Triad, Nexus, and 7 of those CNAMEs that they're using. As we mentioned, they're expanding this rapidly. And we believe that they read our blog post, they read our research on this, and they saw our little chart with the CNAMEs, and they said, what if we made it 1,000 CNAMEs? What if we did 50 CNAMEs every day, and we used DGA domains on those as well? And so there's a lot of very interesting threat research that is still ongoing with this, and basically lots of opportunities to see this. But we do want to point out that these types of money laundering networks, these fake casino websites, you're going to see them in a lot of different places. And if you see it, pause. You may have something there, and you should just keep on uncovering that onion. And there are a lot of open questions.
So we've got a couple open questions here that are still existing on Triad Nexus. One is, how much money has been lost to the different scams? We see the scale at which they operate, but we don't always see all of those transactions. The scale is increasing. It's been around for a long time, and it's getting more complex every day. So it's getting harder and harder to track. How have they stayed online while abusing prominent brand names? That's a question for the brand owners. I don't want to delve too much into that one, but it is something to think about. And then who's ultimately behind that? That's the piece that we've been trying to get to today. That's the piece that we're continuing to research. How many people does it take to keep something like this active? You can use automation, but at a certain point, you still need to make sure that your operators understand all of the pieces. And then with tens of thousands of different domains running different scams, the infrastructure needed to support that just sort of grows over time. Another question we have is other CDNs, which we have internally noticed and we have other research on. We call them malicious CDNs, but how many others are focusing on it where this illicit revenue that they're getting is part of their business model, right? So they're a CDN, yes, but they're also providing that service to threat actors specifically. And we saw that 80% discount. It leads you to wonder how much of their infrastructure is valid, benign, versus automatically detected as malicious. And then a couple more questions here. We got how the public is being targeted. There's obviously a wide array of different brand names. And then how the cybersecurity industry can collaborate to take down this network. Sharing research as we do here, as others do elsewhere, helps a lot. Whatever you can talk about publicly. Obviously, there are certain things that even we omitted from this because, again, the threat actors do read our blogs. We have seen in real time, our blog goes live, they see it, they change their infrastructure, and because they did that, we get to track how they're doing it the new time. So I appreciate that for threat actors that are out there,
And really, the key to this is collaboration is key. So none of this research really would have restarted if people hadn't talked about that polyfill supply chain attack. And even though people were brushing aside the redirections to low-quality casino websites, we knew from our research that there was probably something behind it. And so we're here sharing this research. We're also talking about how Amazon is currently behind the process. They're really not getting it as fast as we could, but Cloudflare's done a great job, Microsoft, Akamai. There are ways to stop these folks so that they stop trying to target your network, stop trying to illicitly acquire IP addresses. And as people are researching these types of networks, if you know about financial losses, trying to submit them to ic3.gov, that's an important service. IC3 is basically used by law enforcement and prosecutors in the U.S. to help connect together a website or a network of websites and the actual financial losses from them so that we can get the resources to prosecute those networks. And so it really does take a village to research this type of stuff and then get that in the open. So wanted to thank everyone for being here and your time today.
Yep. So again, just the key thing that we focus on here at Silent Push is getting to the pre-weaponization phase, right? Getting to the left side as they're standing up the infrastructure, understanding how threat actors are standing up their infrastructure, and then providing you with a platform that lets you do it. So if you'd like to try that, if you'd like to follow along with any of our steps, you can register for free our community edition right here. You can take a picture of the slide, you can come ask me, you can Google Silent Push. All of them will get you to the same place. But again, I just want to help move the direction of thinking to stop getting them after they've already got in. An IOC does not help you. An indicator of compromise is probably already taken down. They might have already abandoned it. And if you go after it, they don't care. Right? We need to move toward indicators of future attack, which is the pre-weaponization phase. We need to be catching them as they're standing up their infrastructure and not alerting them, but just not letting them in. So thank you, everyone.